compiler without jumping through hoops. Break the constraints of inflexible licensing, forced upgrades, and expense. This Fujitsu NetCOBOL webinar is sponsored by GT Software. Before I introduce our presenter for today, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping notes with you. Please note that all attendees are on mute, so therefore if you should have any technical difficulties or need to ask a question dealing with any kind of issues you may be having with the technical aspects of GoToWebinar, please use the chat feature located at the bottom right-hand side of your chat panel to send any questions or comments you have to me. Also, you can use the same chat panel to send in any questions you have about today's presentation to our presenter. To make sure we get through the entire presentation in our allotted time, we will hold all questions until the end. But anytime you have a question, please feel free to go ahead and send that on in, once again, using the chat panel located at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Now I'm pleased to tell you a little bit about today's presenter, Tim O'Brien. Tim is the Manager of Enterprise Solutions here at GT Software. He has been involved with technology for over 30 years, beginning his career in the U.S. Air Force, working with legacy mainframe applications. While at Fujitsu Software, Tim served as a Senior Systems Engineer in SME, working with the Fujitsu COBOL Compiler, and was also involved in testing the NetCOBOL for .NET compiler. While with Microsoft, Tim was a key member of the Enterprise Platform Modernization team. Today, Tim serves as the Principal Technical Liaison with the GT Software Fujitsu Partner Relationship. Now, before I turn the presentation over to Tim, we thought it would be quite interesting to kick off our presentation with a poll question so we can get the idea where you are running your COBOL applications. On your screen now, you should be seeing the question, where are you running your COBOL applications, with 3 answer options: distributed environment, mainframe, or both. If you could take a moment and select an answer, we would greatly appreciate it. Okay, it looks like a lot of answers are coming in. That's very exciting for us. All right, great. Thank you so much for participating in our poll. And now as it looks like all of our answers have come in, I'm going to turn this presentation now over to today's presenter, Tim O'Brien. Take it away, Tim.
Thanks, Brandy. Hello, I'm Tim O'Brien, and I'm delighted to be with you here today. I'm the Manager of Enterprise Solutions here at GT Software. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce GT Software to those of you who are unfamiliar with our company. GT Software was founded in 1982, and we're committed to providing world-class innovative solutions to governments and industry alike through a worldwide sales and support network. We're laser-focused on the future, but also recognize the benefits of tried and true technologies. Our product portfolio is comprised of products in support for legacy platforms and newer open systems or distributed technologies. Many of our products allow us to bridge the gap between these types of new technologies and allow customers to leverage technologies to migrate application and data workload from the mainframe, or leverage application and data workload on the mainframe through the use of thoughtful and innovative technologies developed by GT Software. We've been a trusted partner to over 2,500 customers worldwide and have worked with customers from many industries in finance, healthcare, manufacturing, aviation, and energy, just to name a few. We believe that we are uniquely positioned in the marketplace to help our customers meet today's IT challenges. GT Software is also the sole distributor of Fujitsu's NetCOBOL line of products, COBOL products, outside of Japan. Now, some of the most important considerations to focus on when selecting a COBOL compiler are cost, agility, and quality. In our last webinar, we covered cost. For many technology purchases, hardware and software costs are only the easiest, or usually the easiest part of an investment to quantify. And most companies understand hard costs are not the only costs. What's equally important to consider are the hidden costs. In today's presentation, we're going to be talking about agility. But as I mentioned, cost and quality can also play an impactful role in the agility discussion as well. If you'd like to learn more about the cost edition of our webinar, you can visit the NetCOBOL website at www.netcobol.com to view the recording of the first presentation in our 3-part Refocus Your COBOL webinar series. And that's titled locked into an expensive COBOL compiler, break free of runtime fees forever. Or you can register for the next and last webinar in the series, which will go into depth on quality considerations of choosing a COBOL compiler, and is titled Getting a Quality Compiler for Your COBOL Shouldn't Be Restrictive. The webinar will be held on May the 5th, 2015 at 2 p.m. Eastern. And I believe that now Brandy has our second survey for us. Is that correct, Brandy?
That is correct, Tim. Right now on your screen, you should see our second poll question, and we really would appreciate your answer as we can learn more about our audience today and kind of get some information to you that would better help you solve any problems you may be having. So our next question is, what COBOL compilers you have? And our answer choices you see right there on the screen. So you can take a few seconds and answer. That would be great. I do have some answers to the survey coming in as we speak. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. We really appreciate it. What a fun way to learn more about our audience today. Okay, it looks like we're about wrapping up our results here. So I will go ahead and turn the presentation back over to you, Tim.
Thanks a lot, Brandy. In today's webinar, we're going to discuss the legacy of COBOL, COBOL's impact on business agility, some of the challenges with some of the other vendor COBOL implementations, some licensing issues, the future of COBOL, and why we believe that standards are very important. And then finally, some case studies of customers who've been successful in implementing their business, improving their business agility with COBOL. Now, COBOL is one of the oldest programming languages and has had an impressive history. Created in 1959, its name is an acronym for Common Business-Oriented Language. The COBOL specification was created by a committee of researchers from private industry, universities, and government that was formed in May of 1959 to recommend a short-range approach to a common business language. One of the participants in that early effort was Grace Hopper, the creator of the Flowmatic language. Like many such endeavors, the committee faced many challenges. They had their share of proponents and naysayers, and there were a lot of languages that were evaluated during that time, one of them being Flowmatic, and then we had Amato and IBM's own Comtran. But in the end, the Flowmatic language was really regarded as the most influential in the evolution of the language that we know as COBOL today. In 1962, IBM gave COBOL a real shot in the arm by announcing that it would replace its own Comtran language with COBOL. IBM's early endorsement went a long way to validating COBOL as an important mainstream language, and I think that that's to the benefit of everybody. Now, it was back in the 1980s. I'm going to kind of take you down a little trip down memory lane here. Back in the 1980s, I was in the United States Air Force when I first encountered Grace Hopper. I was on temporary duty at Maxwell Air Force Base attending a training and data processing seminar when the then Commodore Grace Hopper was a guest speaker at one of the events. I still remember her discussion about the early days of computing, the evolution of the COBOL language, and of course her description of some of the early machines that she worked on. She told us the story of how the term debug came into existence. I think that was pretty interesting, and that's something that she was very famous for. She also gave us some interesting insight into the fact that even in those early days, people who created computer programs were focused on efficiency. Now, as the story goes, one of the programmers that she was working with was focused on the fact that a particular programming practice was more efficient and would save a whole lot of compute time. Now, when asked by the Commodore, how much time will this save, the response was numbered in nanoseconds. Now, today we all accept the time interval known as nanoseconds, but back in the day, that was really an uncommon measurement of time. So to quantify that time interval, she asked one of the engineers for a little bit of guidance. She wanted to know how far electricity could travel in the given time interval of a nanosecond. For those of you who are kind of curious about that, the distance is almost a foot. In later years, when she gave presentations to up-and-coming programmers like myself, the Commodore used an interesting visual aid to represent the distance electricity could travel in a nanosecond. As I recall, she had a young ensign wandering about the auditorium, handing out these 1-foot lengths of telephone wire to all of the attendees. Trust me, she made the presentation a very, very memorable event. Grace Hopper was a pioneer in our industry. She had an impressive military career, and she was a gifted technologist, mathematician, professor, and most certainly a visionary. Back in 1997, some 38 years after COBOL was introduced, the Gartner Group reported that 80% of the world's business ran on COBOL, with over 200 billion lines of code in production. That means that between 1959 and 1997, there was an average of 5 billion lines of COBOL written and put into production each year. Gartner estimated that that pace would continue at a rate of about 5 billion lines of COBOL being written annually. Now, if you take that 5 billion lines of code production per year and extrapolate that to where we are today, 56 years since the introduction of COBOL, we're rapidly approaching 300 billion lines of COBOL code. Another impressive metric is that the investment made into COBOL systems over the past 50-plus years is said to be worth something on the order of about $2 trillion. COBOL is an impressive language. It was designed with flexibility in mind. It was designed to run on multiple platforms from the start. It was designed for business computing from the start. It has evolved, survived, and thrived. COBOL can work with many databases from IBM's DB2, Oracle, and Microsoft SQL Server. More recent capabilities include integration with technologies like Microsoft's .NET. COBOL can be integrated or used as part of a services layer with technologies like SOAP or JSON. It can be used in the cloud and so much more. Even though COBOL has continued to evolve, it's still reliable, stable, and predictable. COBOL has enjoyed wide adoption in small, medium, and large businesses of all types, banking, stock exchanges, healthcare, academia, and by governments at the local, state, or province level, and at the federal level in countries all over the world. According to a 2009 survey conducted by Harris Interactive, 70 to 75% of the business and transaction systems around the world still run on COBOL. One of the most significant factoids that has come out is the fact that the average American still interacts with a COBOL program or system on an average of about 13 times a day. Now, I believe it's time for our third survey of the day. Is that correct, Brandy?
Yes, Tim, that's correct. We have our third and final survey. I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll question. You'll see 5 statements asking you to select a description or descriptions that best describe your experience with your COBOL compiler. So if you could all please take a few seconds and answer, that will help us get an idea of suggestions and ways we can shape the remainder of the presentation to best address your needs. Tim, while our attendees today are answering the poll, I've received a couple of reports that your sound is fading in and out. So while they're answering, I'm going to let you do a little sound check, maybe look at your equipment. Make sure we get you coming in crystal clear.
All righty, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you, sir. I see we have some answers coming in from the poll. We appreciate your answers and your participation. Okay, Tim, are you, your equipment, did you come out okay?
I do believe so.
Okay, you do sound better, so we apologize for that slight technical goof. All right, so I'm going to close this poll now, and of course later on in the presentation we can check out our results here. Okay, we have a few more people coming in. I just want to make sure they're counted before I show you the results of this poll. Great. Let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so on the screen you should see our results. Looks like we're running pretty half and half. Most of you with your COBOL compiler, half of our audience, has trouble with proprietary dialect, while our other half of the audience is still bothered by those pesky high COBOL runtime fees. So what do you make of that, Tim? And also, as you remember, we took the poll questions earlier. We also learned some valuable things. We learned that there's a fair mix in our audience. About half of you are running your COBOL applications on the mainframe, and the other half of you are running on the distributed environment. And also, we had a fair mix of all the COBOL compilers across the board, with most of you still running mainframe COBOL. So I definitely think that when we get back to our presentation, Tim, that you'll be able to offer some great solutions and some great advice for our audience.
Absolutely,
so thank you very much.
Brandy. Thank you.
Great. And I will turn the presentation back over to you now. Yes, sir?
Good deal. Thank you, Brandy. I appreciate it. Okay, let's go ahead and continue on with the presentation here. You know, we listened to the poll questions. You know, I've got a couple of things that I want to cover to address some of these issues. Let's go ahead and continue and talk a little bit about the aspect of agility when you start talking about your COBOL compiler, and indeed this whole technology coming from the mainframe or coming from other COBOL vendors. You know, business leaders face new challenges every single day. In business, the term business agility has almost become a cliche. But to those who live their business, understand that there's always competitive pressures out there. Taking care of the business and its customers is job one. The fact that if you don't grow your business will eventually wither and die. It takes the highest level of commitment to be innovative and impactful in the marketplace. These days, the marketplace seems to demand innovation on a continuous and timely schedule. Improvements in operational effectiveness for organizations are not just the nice-to-have things, they're absolutely critical. The ability to see changes in the marketplace, adjust course, and evolve operations, products, and processes is really an essential part of everyday business life. That is business agility. Where business agility is concerned, and this is pretty important here, folks, where business agility is concerned, one of the most impactful areas of an organization has been and continues to be related to technology. Since the advent of the earliest mainframe computers, business users have continued to press for improved capabilities and performance, more flexibility, all at a reasonable cost. There have been many changes to business computing over the years, and what was widely considered to be a cost center has become an important profit center. So the reality is that all of this has driven business executives and IT leadership to focus on maturing and optimizing operations within their data center. The challenge of optimizing IT isn't just about trying to reduce the cost of IT, but to keep a real important balance between lowering costs and managing IT in a flexible way so that the whole organization can be operationally flexible in the marketplace. Make no mistake, containing costs is and will remain a matter of great importance to every C-level executive. But the plain reality is that these days executives are looking to replace expensive technologies because there's much more choice in the marketplace. And while COBOL has had a prominent place in the market for decades, that technology is not immune to issues that affect business agility. Some examples of this would be COBOL products with proprietary language extensions implemented by some vendors that are not in accordance with the COBOL standard. That creates vendor lock-in and contributes to a high cost of acquisition, maintenance, and support owing to the non-standard dialects. This particular issue also affects developer productivity. One interesting phenomenon that we have seen is that some COBOL vendors have relaxed the standard rules for COBOL, thus allowing COBOL developers to write code that's not in accordance with the standard. There's some COBOL lore out there that says that there's a COBOL compiler that is so relaxed that you can write a letter home to your mother and get the letter to compile. Now, this sort of thing also contributes to vendor lock-in, and it creates a maintenance problem, actually a maintenance headache. It increases complexity and ultimately costs the organization a lot of money. Now, let's talk about those COBOL runtime license fees. Let me be very, very clear here. These fees are just plain wrong. Many of us are committed to COBOL. It's a technology that's proven itself over many decades, And we want to see it continue because we believe that it's still a very relevant language. Languages like Java, C# and VB.NET don't require expensive COBOL runtime or expensive runtime license fees. And runtime license fees make the COBOL language more expensive and cumbersome to manage, and they place an unnecessary strain on many organizations' budgets. And if all of that weren't enough, keeping track of runtime licenses is both an onerous and burdensome process. And the organization may also find that it has some exposure from a financial perspective, and they may have exposure with penalties if they're found to be in non-compliance with their particular end-user license agreement as it applies to runtime licenses. Fujitsu NetCOBOL has no runtime license fees, period, full stop. You pay only for the compiler and deploy your COBOL where you want, to as many systems as you want, any time that you want. There should be no doubt that COBOL runtime license fees drive up costs and adversely affect business agility. And just so that we can all be clear about the platforms that we run on, Fujitsu NetCOBOL is available for native Windows, for x64 and x86, for NetCOBOL for Windows with .NET, and of course for Linux, again with x86 and x64. And finally, it's also available for Solaris. Now, at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and take a shift over. Let's take a quick look at some of the customer stories and get a look at Fujitsu NetCOBOL in action and see how these organizations have used Fujitsu NetCOBOL to increase their agility. Our first case study today is a county court. This particular customer served approximately, 514,000 residents and interacted with law enforcement agencies at the state, local, and federal level. And as a division of the state trial court system, they managed cases for defendants who were on trial. They needed a system that would be absolutely reliable and stable at a very reasonable cost. They had a very old case management system that wasn't really working for them very well. They had an opportunity to go through a legacy migration of that system, converting to COBOL to Java, but they found that it really didn't scale well, and they had some very, very significant performance problems. After their first migration failed, they tried a different approach. They converted to NetCOBOL for .NET and NeoCase. With this solution, they were successful because the business rules and business processes that were embodied in their old COBOL system were able to be preserved. The customer had an annual savings of $720,000 per year and eliminated $60,000 in monthly chargebacks for mainframe time. I think that's pretty impressive. Their performance improved too. The query times were cut in half, and the weekly system management for the system was reduced very significantly. Our second case study is a luxury cruise line. Now, this cruise line had some aging mainframes in place for many years that were generally reliable but pretty expensive. The cruise line determined that a financial premium for reliability was not really the only drawback that they had. Their legacy technology on the mainframe included a lot of CICS and COBOL code to it. There was more than 2 million lines of code at the headquarters system and another 500,000 lines of COBOL code and CICS on the shipboard mainframe systems. It was difficult to integrate with contemporary systems like the ship onboard point-of-sale system. The cruise line also had significant problems attracting, recruiting, and retaining qualified COBOL CICS programmers and also keeping their applications running. They certainly needed a system that was very, very flexible and cost-effective. Eventually, the decision was made to migrate off of those aging mainframes because the mainframes just had significant challenges because the operation had a round-the-clock requirement. The process had to be very, very fast for customers and users alike. Again, the ships are 7 by 24 environments When one cruise ends, another one starts. And it's very important that customer bills are accurate when disembarking and that the oncoming customers' accounts are immediately initiated. So, business agility achieved. Using GT Software's migration solution, the cruise line was able to preserve its original business logic. They were able to transform their COBOL and CICS to NetCOBOL and NeoKix. And this proved to be very much to be a more efficient, faster, less expensive process, and it made possible a very much less risky phased migration approach from the mainframe to a web environment. This new technology added a lot more simplicity and efficiency for the company. On board ship, the checkout process that took 90 seconds is down from an hour. All of the systems could be backed up a whole lot more frequently. Everything integrated with a whole lot more ease. All of the reports are digital and no longer require printing. And rather than adding and deleting accounts at the start of a new trip, the crew easily reset the entire passenger roster, thus eliminating errors and time-consuming adjustments and a frustrating experience for their passengers. So that's pretty important. So we have a number of options for migrating legacy COBOL from the mainframe or from other COBOL dialects that are deployed on open systems platforms. We have trusted partners like Fujitsu, Expersolve, and Plexus, who along with GT Software have a complete solution and a practical tools-based approach to migration. We invite you to contact us and discuss your challenges with us and our partners. Business agility is greatly affected by your technology choices. COBOL is a tried and true technology, and whether we're talking about migration from a mainframe or another vendor's COBOL, we can help you save money. Now, if you're interested in learning more about NetCOBOL, please reach out to us at 800-765-4348, or you can visit us on the web at www.netcobol.com. You can also follow us on social media. Now, I'm available to take some questions. Brandy?
Hi, Tim. Great. Thank you so much for the presentation. We really learned a lot. So now at this time, we'd like to start taking your questions. I do already have a few questions for you, Tim, but I just want to remind our audience that if you do have any additional questions that you haven't already submitted, please use the chat panel located at the bottom right of your screen to send those on in, and we'll have Tim give you an answer. Okay, great. Tim, I'm going to go ahead and give you your first question here, if you're ready.
I am.
Okay. All right, great. Our first question is, do you have a tool or set of tools to help companies migrate from the mainframe?
Yes, we do. For CICS, we have a tool called the NeoKix Wizard. It's an integrated solution with Microsoft's Visual Studio. This tool scans and transforms BMS maps into ASP.NET, and it also takes and converts the associated COBOL to NetCOBOL for .NET. Okay?
All right, great. Thank you so much, Tim. All right, our next question is, how difficult is it to make my COBOL code work with other technologies like .NET?
Okay, actually it's pretty straightforward. Standard ANSI COBOL should work well with NetCOBOL for .NET. When you transition to this compiler, you'll also have the benefit of leveraging the entire .NET framework to enhance your COBOL applications, as well as seamlessly interacting with other .NET programs that would be written in other first-class languages in the .NET world, like C# or VB.NET or any of the other ones, Perl, Python, and all of the rest. So a lot of flexibility when you transition from regular standard COBOL to NetCOBOL for .NET. Okay?
Okay, great. And while on the subject of .NET, Tim, I actually have another .NET-related question for you. Okay. We are looking at exposing some of our old legacy systems via a services layer, and we are a .NET shop. Can we use NetCOBOL with the web services components in the .NET framework?
Absolutely. The Microsoft.NET framework has web services functionality in the .NET namespace. So all of that functionality can be exploited by your COBOL code. with NetCOBOL for .NET. Okay?
Okay, great. And if anyone has any more questions, go ahead and send those on in. While we're waiting to see if we get any other questions, I just wanted to address a couple of requests I received. Yes, we will be making the presentation slides and today's recording available, so look for a follow-up email from us in the near future with those materials available for you. And I just want to remind everyone again, for those of you who may have joined us at our last webinar, we are currently doing our Refocus Your COBOL webinar series. This was webinar 2 in our 3-part series, so our conclusion will be on May 5th with our Getting a Quality Compiler for COBOL Should Be Restricted webinar. So please, I encourage you to register for that webinar. You can also visit netcobol.com to download the recording of our first webinar, which was about cost and talk about how to deal with those pesky runtime fees. Okay, and if you should, Tim, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in today, so I think we can wrap this up. But if you later on think of any other questions, you can always contact us at info@gtsoftware.com or give us a call, and Tim will be more than happy to help answer any questions you have. Well, Tim, thank you so much for today's presentation.
And thank you, Brandy. And on behalf of GT Software, Fujitsu, and all of our trusted partners, I'd like to thank each of you for your time today. Please remember that we have one additional webinar in this series, and I look forward to spending some time with you during our next webinar. Thank you guys very much, and have a great day.
Thank you. Goodbye.